What's the absolute most dangerous space on a turbine site? You might assume it's right next to the spinning generator shaft, or, I don't know, maybe near the high voltage electrical panels. But there's this one very specific assumption that gets engineers into serious trouble. And that's the belief that a shutdown machine is a safe machine. Spoiler alert, it's not. The reality is, the most dangerous space is the turbine enclosure itself. Look, this isn't just some noisy metal box keeping the rain off the engine. It is essentially a booby-trapped room. Even when that engine is totally stopped, this space is holding lethal heat, potentially combustible gas, and a deadly carbon dioxide fire suppression system that can literally suffocate a person in seconds. So let's get right into today's explainer: enclosure entry, windmilling, and the welding trap. Section 1. The lethal metal box and the 4 entry rules. Now notice the heavy emphasis on the word mechanical here. You absolutely can't just flip a switch to disable the CO2 system electronically and call it a day. No way. It must be mechanically blocked via a block valve. Why? Because if a CO2 system discharges inside that enclosed space, it displaces all the breathable oxygen almost instantly. So mechanically blocking it, physically locking it out, completely removes any chance of an accidental discharge while someone is working inside. Okay, so the absolute crucial point to remember is that 4 distinct things have to be completely 100% true before anyone even touches that enclosure door. Number 1, the engine must be confirmed fully shut down. Number 2, like we just talked about, the CO2 system has to be mechanically blocked, and you've got to physically verify that position. 3, those secondary ventilation fans, they need to be deactivated so they don't whip up dangerous air currents while you're in there. And 4, a dedicated observer must be stationed right at the open door at all times. And listen, they aren't there to hand you tools or help turn a wrench. They are purely a rescue trigger in case you're inside and suddenly can't get out unassisted. Moving right along to Section 2, the coasting trap, also known as windmilling. There is just a massive trap waiting for anyone who assumes an engine turned off is actually, well, stopped. Residual physics play a huge role here. Just because the fuel is cut off and combustion is totally done doesn't mean that massive turbine shaft has actually stopped moving. And more importantly for us, it definitely doesn't mean the engine's hardware is safe. Which brings us to windmilling. So what is that? Windmilling is when external airflow, say a really strong draft or wind pulling up through the exhaust stack, keeps the turbine shaft spinning, even though the engine is completely shut down. But here's the fatal flaw in that scenario. The engine's primary lube oil pump is physically driven by that exact same shaft during normal operation, right? But it actually requires high combustion speeds to build up proper oil pressure. So when the shaft is just lazily windmilling from a draft, you've got thousands of pounds of metal rotating with absolutely zero lubrication. Think of it exactly like coasting a car downhill for miles with the engine completely off. The wheels are turning, sure, but absolutely nothing up top is getting lubricated. And there's a really stark contrast in what's considered acceptable here. If the shaft is windmilling slowly, we're talking under 100 RPM, right after a lubricated run, it's actually generally okay for up to 2 weeks. But the second it goes faster than that, specifically into that 100 to 1,000 RPM band, you are pushed straight into the extreme danger zone. You literally go from having 2 weeks of safe margin to a very rapidly ticking clock. So let's do a quick check to test this logic. Imagine you're on site. The engine is shut down, but a strong draft has the shaft windmilling at, let's say, 150 RPM. Now that's well into that extreme danger band. How long are you allowed to let that continue before it turns into a critical lubrication risk for those bearings? Any guesses? You have a maximum of 5 minutes. That is it. Just a few minutes at that speed band. Because remember, there is literally zero lubrication happening. Once you hit that 5-minute mark, the risk of tearing up those bearings climbs incredibly fast. You can't just sit around and wait it out. You have to step in with specialized external lubrication or physically intervene. All right, Section 3, the invisible welding trap. So welding anywhere on or even near the turbine generator package is strictly prohibited, unless it's specifically authorized by engineering. And hey, even then, the welding machine frame must be perfectly grounded. Why the paranoia? Because the damage caused by a sloppy ground is completely invisible to the naked eye, right up until your multi-million-dollar machine tears itself apart. And this brilliantly illustrates the chain reaction. If your welding current isn't perfectly grounded, it's just going to take the path of least resistance, right through the turbine casing. That stray current then actually arcs across the microscopic clearances inside the rotating bearings. It's crazy. This causes pitting and brunelling, which is basically permanent microscopic surface damage. So, what happens? The next time you fire up that engine and it spins up to 10,000 RPM, that invisibly damaged bearing fails catastrophically. Just like that, a seemingly unrelated hot work job completely ruins the engine from the inside out.
Bringing us to section 4, surviving the traps. Let's wrap this up.
So, what you should really take away from this explainer are 3 absolute pillars of enclosure safety. First off, that 4-step entry checklist. Engine off, CO2 mechanically blocked, fans deactivated, observer stationed is completely non-negotiable. Period. Second, if you spot windmilling over 100 RPM, remember you've got 0 lubrication and a strict 5-minute clock before you start destroying hardware. And third, welding anywhere near the package risks that invisible catastrophic bearing pitting. Guys, these aren't just annoying bureaucratic guidelines. They are hard physical limits designed to protect human life and some very highly sensitive machinery. All right, so you now have the knowledge to safely execute an enclosure entry and dodge those sudden invisible traps. But surviving the machine today, that's really only half the battle. I want you to think about this. What is the ongoing, daily discipline required to keep this incredibly complex engine healthy, not just for an afternoon, but for years of continuous operation? Well, that exact question leads us right into the philosophy of on-condition maintenance, which we're definitely going to explore next time. Until then, keep your standards high and absolutely never trust a shutdown machine.